Hey everybody, waitingfornextyear.com podcast, second podcast of the week, and I think like the third week in a row. Jeff, how's it going?
Going well. It's impressive. We've been able to do this 3 weeks in a row. We both have kids. You know, normally we get sidetracked pretty easily, so this is pretty good.
Well, and I don't know if we told everybody, but this was our ploy to create more content or be more present in the Waiting for Next Year content universe, was to just decide that you and I were going to record every Thursday as much as possible for as long as possible to kind of get back on that horse.
And the wonderful thing about Cleveland sports is that there's just literally always something to talk about. Like a week span, that's the whole season for Cleveland sports.
I know. And you're not even a Browns fan, and here we are. We're going to talk about Jarvis Landry because you've got feelings.
I do have feelings. I'm in my feelings.
You're mad online about Jarvis Landry.
I am mad online about Jarvis. Did you see he deleted? So, I'm sure everybody saw that he took a couple shots at Ryan Tannehill's former quarterback. He said that.
I don't know that this is actually on the Browns fan radar necessarily, but it could be and it should be.
So he said something about these are the best quarterbacks he's ever played with. And then he went on to take some more personal shots about how Tannehill didn't organize off-season workouts and how they didn't have a very good relationship, and Tannehill never called him after he got his contract and all this stuff. And he also went through and deleted all of his old social media posts that were like him and Ryan Tannehill on a boat fishing together and working out together and all this kind of stuff. So somebody on Dolphins Twitter joked that Jarvis Landry did the one thing that no one else could do, and that was bring together Dolphins fans behind Ryan Tannehill. Because he's a pretty big lightning rod in Dolphins Twitter, so it was pretty funny. But yeah,
and what's funny is I know better than to try and defend the guy because he's a member of the Cleveland Browns. Now I don't bother with that kind of stuff. I'm just like, well, you know, it's like wide receiver stuff.
Yeah, and it's one of those where if he was just saying that it was the best quarterbacks ever, like, okay, you know, like Josh Gordon came out and said they have the best wide receiver group in the NFL or whatever. Like, yeah, you're always just trying to make those quotes. I mean, wasn't Dwayne Bowe just constantly saying hilariously over the top hyperbolic things about Browns quarterbacks?
Well, and nobody defended miserable, awful coaches like Joe Thomas.
Yes. And
Joe Thomas's record in the press in support of ultimate failures is like perfect record.
And so you expect some of that, and that's all fine. I get that. It was the like specific shots about not organizing off-season workouts when like that's just clearly something that like it is not true. That's what made it so frustrating. Like we know, like it's been reported every year that Tannehill organizes those and does that, and so whatever. But yeah, it's just one of those where Landry he's just an interesting guy because you love him because he's fiery and he'll chuck a safety instead of going out of bounds, and he'll fire up your team, and he'll get in guys' faces, and you love him. But then he also does, you know, stuff like this, and yell at a coach on the sideline, and get 15-yard penalties for no apparent reason for just pushing a guy after the play. And you know, there's a little bit of, I don't know if Draymond Green is the right example, but yeah, there's a little bit of that push-pull there, where the stuff that makes you love him is also the stuff that drives you nuts. And so when he leaves, it's real easy to turn on him.
Well,
it made it a lot easier.
And I'm not saying all receivers are created equally, but like there's a long line of like interesting characters, divas, you know.
Why is that the position? Why is wide receiver the one that does that?
It's a combination of two things. Number one, it's like your best athlete. So it's somebody who's got confidence beyond the rest of the team, and it's also somebody who's likely not like short man's disease. You know, you got the taller. They think they're the specimen of all specimen on the team, and they do have an inferiority complex because they never get the credit that the quarterback does.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, if anybody on the team would have these kind of crazy things, I would think it would be like a corner, because they're very important, and you have to have insane confidence and just not really be rational, because you know, a big part of your job is just getting burnt all the time. Like, you know, even the best cornerbacks just lose frequently,
especially with the rules.
Right. And so I'm almost surprised corners aren't more like wide receivers than they are, because I understand you have to be a little bit crazy to be a corner. But yeah, wide receivers are just consistently, and I do kind of wonder if it becomes a thing where a couple of guys did it, so everybody follows suit. Kind of like how Popovich and Belichick are mean to the media, so now just all football coaches are mean to the media. Like it's like a prerequisite to getting a football coach job is kind of like being surly and mean and angry all the time. So I wonder if it's just kind of like part of the whole shtick now.
In a different realm altogether, Gary Vaynerchuk is always talking about the disease that Steve Jobs created, where all CEOs had to be like off-color jerks to their employees and stuff, and like just kind of downright mean. And he didn't. There was just such. Everyone was like, "Well, Steve Jobs did it, so I'm going to copycat him. I'm going to be brutally honest, and I'm not going to care about anybody's feelings, and that's just how I'm going to run my company because that's how a founder, that's how a genius, turtleneck wearing guy acts."
Yeah, and so it just becomes expected of these guys. But I will say, very few of them.
And
look
by
like
the way,
I'm
I'm sick of Popovich's act when it comes to being mean to the media. Like,
I hate it.
Not his entire act, because obviously he's great and he's. But the people who fall all over themselves, it's like you can only fall all over yourself for that act for so long until you're like, yeah, we get it. That's what he does. Okay, that's what he does.
And I'm okay with. Like if he was demanding media members be better, like if people are asking dumb questions and he challenges them or something like that. But when he's being mean to Doris Burke on the sideline, you're like, no, this is an act and this isn't okay anymore. Like when he's doing it to people who are doing their jobs well, who are just being demeaned in their position for no apparent reason, like that's just not cool.
And I do get that talking to a coach on the sideline between the third and the fourth quarter of an NBA Finals game, it's almost too self-aware for a league in terms of its own media to demand something like that. It's really dumb, and you're not going to get anything valuable there. But don't take it out on Doris Burke. Don't take it out on, rest in peace, Craig Sager. Just give a couple of canned answers like everybody else. Right.
You can make it. You can be short and you can cut it off and you don't have to expound on anything, but you don't have to be mean to the actual person asking the questions.
It doesn't make you a better coach.
Right. And you can acknowledge the situation is dumb and treat it as dumb without demeaning the person whose job it is to be there and do that.
Yes. All right. Let's talk a little bit about LeBron. Are you tired of LeBron watch yet?
No, it's becoming a sickness. Like I think we talked about last week. I'm like on my phone, like just scrolling constantly. Like every time I get a buzz, I think it's a Woj bomb. It's kind of fun because we're in this weird spot where we can look at draft prospects and we can look at crazy trades for new superstars, and we can also look at trades to trade all of our guys off and get more draft picks. We're in like every area of off season right now. We're a good team, a bad team, a rebuilding team, a championship team. We're all over. So there's so many things that could happen. It's kind of fun. But I do just kind of want to know what direction we're going to go. If he's going to leave, that's fine, and we can start moving that direction. But if this is going to be a whole thing where he drags it out until middle of July again, it's going to get old real quick.
Yeah, and apologies if LeBron has done something by the time you're hearing this, and this is old news. But are you still there, Jeff?
Yeah, sorry, you cut out for just a second.
Okay. Do you have like that one place that you would be in utter hell if he went?
If he goes to LA and they don't make enough moves to be competitive, that's going to be hard. Like if he goes to LA just to be in the city of LA and it's like him and Paul George and a bunch of kids and they don't make it out of the second round ever, that would be hard for me to watch. Like if he goes somewhere to compete and still be good, whatever. He can go to Boston and I don't even care. Like that's fine, whatever.
Oh, see, Boston's my nightmare.
And it should be. I feel like I would be more mad about it, but
those fans don't deserve anything nice ever again. They've had much nice,
and they are. So it would be funny to watch themselves twist themselves into pretzels trying to suddenly cheer for LeBron after years of calling him a baby and all this stupid stuff. Like, how many retweets do you think that Simmons tweet about the chance he was coming up with for the Cavs game would get immediately after that happened?
Oh, it was that whole thing was so embarrassing.
And it would also be somewhat hilarious if he went to Boston, because they would probably have to trade Kyrie for that to happen. So if Kyrie got traded because LeBron decided to go to his new team, it would be a little bit funny, right? I try not to be petty about the whole Kyrie thing, but it would be a little bit funny.
It would be a little bit funny. By the way, as an aside, has anything funny ever followed this idea where somebody was like, "Hey, you know, it'd be really funny," and then came up with a list of things?
Right.
Has anything funny ever come from that?
I'm trying to remember what they were. You're a baby. Like none of them were like overly creative, or it wasn't like he had some really good chance that he just couldn't wait to get out there. And it's an annoying premise, but at least he had one or two good ones. Like they were all bad. Everything about it was bad.
Well,
I can't believe how much he's jumped the shark.
The key to like the Duke fans pulling that kind of stuff off is that they plan these things in secret and they print them out on a page, and like everybody's actually in on it. Nobody's trying to cajole anybody else into doing it.
Right. He's the guy trying to start the wave.
That makes it douchey.
A critical juncture of a game. He's jumped the shark so much, and it's frustrating because he was really good at one point. But watching him turn into this has been pretty annoying.
Well, and his interviews are really good. It's almost like he should leave sports behind to a certain extent.
Yeah, and that is the thing. Like he's so good at sitting people down and getting them to open up and getting interesting conversations going. If he just has become too much of a fan, and he's too focused on that one thing, and it makes it almost skews everything.
Well, and he was always a fan, but it's like at a certain point, it's a lot of what I feel about when I write things on Waiting for Next Year. I feel like I'm just repeating myself at this point, and he was an innovator in terms of really tying in pop culture and everything else to his sports takes and sports opinions and columns and everything. But now, if he references The Wire or Karate Kid, I mean, we're 20 years in. It's like Pearl Jam is not going to shock us by writing the sequel to Alive. Like, rock bands are so lucky because they get to just keep performing those songs, and those songs keep having that impact on us. But like, when you're a writer, you can't survive on that same shtick over and over again. And it's hysterical that it's happening to Bill Simmons because nobody raked Rick Riley over the coals more than he did.
That's a very good point. I never thought about that. Yeah. He was always pulling up every single old column, and I guarantee you could do that to Bill Simmons now and find the same references to the same things constantly.
Because Rick Riley wouldn't reinvent himself, and I get it. It's hard to do. Not everybody gets to do that.
But my thing with Simmons is that he used to write about being a fan, and he was a Boston fan, but it wasn't about being a Boston fan. It was just about being a sports fan, and that's how everybody identified with him, right? Like, you identified with him because he was this massive sports fan, and he used Boston as the team, as the vehicle for that, but it wasn't about Boston. But now everything he does is fake trades and speculation, and he went from writing about being a sports fan who just happened to be a Boston fan to just writing about like Boston fan fiction. Like that's all it is now.
Well, and this is the problem. Okay, like let me combine it with music again. You know why Metallica stinks now? Because when they were young and hungry and angry, those songs came from legit place. Now they're a metal band that are like multi hundred millionaires. They're not. There's nothing to be pissed off about. They have to like make things up. Bill Simmons is not like a sports fan anymore. He sat next to Jalen Rose. He texts with Magic Johnson. His teams have won everything. And he's like an insider who lives in LA. He is not Boston sports fan. He's not sports fan. He's media guy who has to pretend that he's still a sports fan because that was his gimmick way back when. And he's had trouble reinventing himself, at least in written format.
And he's a terrible media guy. Right? I mean,
he's a great podcaster.
Right. But I mean, in the sense of if he wants to be kind of insider guy and throw up and be the fake GM and do it more of that style, like a media guy who has those kind of sources and has those conversations, he's terrible at it. It's not like those are engaging. It's not like the ideas he comes up with are good and spark conversation or aren't even bad enough that they start conversation, which is a whole nother genre of sports writing, right? Like, he just kind of lives in the middle somewhere where it's just not entertaining at all.
But at the same time, I don't want this to be a total trash fest because he has used his fame and his platform to create an even bigger platform, and he puts over some really, really great people. And I think his intentions are good. It's just, He should almost go off and be the president and the chief podcaster and leave a bunch of the other stuff alone.
Yeah, he consistently gives people who deserve a voice when it is appearing more and more like they wouldn't anywhere else. And he fights for that. And you can tell the people who have worked for him have an absolute appreciation for him. And that's a pretty clear sign that he's doing something right on that side of things.
But then again, he's also creating the platform that, they've got the LeBron's terrifyingly plausible path to Boston as an article.
That is the hard part, where Grantland didn't have... The Ringer is just so Boston focused, it makes it hard, whereas Grantland didn't feel so obvious.
Its color scheme is Boston Celtics.
And the Twitter feed is just trolling other teams and cheering for Boston, and watching games clearly through a lens of a Boston fan. It's just very strange to try to be a national site, but clearly cheer for one team like that.
How much do you think the emergence of Barstool, another Boston fan site that's kind of gone national, how much do you think that kind of impacts the Boston fatigue? And do you think any of that leaks onto Bill Simmons and the Ringer?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. We get it. And I mean, ESPN clearly follows Boston teams, even if you don't say they have favorable coverage on everything. I mean, they certainly follow them closer than they would many other cities. So you're constantly inundated with it. So getting more Boston content is, we're going to react to it negatively much more than maybe another team we would. So yeah, that's a very good point too.
And I know you're one of the people you're not here for Barstool.
No, and it's hard because I do think that there are a lot of talented people. I mean, it's not that they're terrible and everything they do is bad. There's just enough problematic stuff and people who are good who just kind of look the other way, that it's you could clean this up and you wouldn't lose much of anything. They just don't.
It's an interesting thing though, because I recognize how problematic, Dave Portnoy and some of their beginnings are, and even some of the people that they have on now. But nobody looks at SiriusXM and says, well, you have to, if I don't like 100% of the people on your platform, I'm not going to listen to the 80s channel either. I'm going to cancel my entire subscription. But because Barstool was built on this, do you get what I'm saying? Nobody has to co-sign. Go ahead.
Stoolies and stuff like that. It's a community, and I feel like they've built themselves up as us versus them kind of stuff on a lot of that, where you're either with all of Barstool or against it, and you're a stoolie.
Oh, that's interesting.
Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but I get that sense from it, where it's kind of like this community, and maybe I'm reading that wrong. I'm not going to pretend like I read a ton of their stuff or follow it closely, but it seems like
you're right. That's how they built it. It was like a membership, an unofficial membership, and but that's not how I take it in. I just pardon my take, and a couple of people there, a couple of shows, but it's not like I'm subscribed to the Barstool feeds and
that's kind of like, what is that other site, like the Chive or something like that? And see, I'm old. I don't know all this kind of stuff.
I'm not sure.
But I see that all the time. Don't they have the? But I've seen stuff like that, and they have bumper stickers and things like that, and it's it almost turns me off, because when it starts to feel like this little club or this little cult, it's harder to get in, and you see them kind of reach out and attack people, and it makes it harder. If it was just a site where it was just, hey, everybody does their own thing, I think it would be easier to separate them.
Well, and ultimately you do kind of end up being responsible for the way your audience acts too, because you're creating the environment with which they act in a certain manner. And if every time you get into a fight with somebody and it happens to be a female, you go to the lowest common denominator of possible insults as a community, which it happens every single time. The worst possible things you could say about a woman, every time Barstool gets in a tiff with a woman, it ends up going down that path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they don't seem to self-police well. And I don't know if it's possible. And it's hard because, they write good, but probably attracts a certain amount of an audience that does things like that, even though it's still really, it's hard. It's difficult, and you don't want to talk too much down about it because people really enjoy it. I think there's a bunch of really talented people there, it's not that whole community that's doing it, but it does make the entire community look bad.
Yeah, well, and I always err on the side of, if you don't like something, just don't take it in for yourself then, and let other people have things that they like.
It took me a really long time to get there with wrestling tweets, I'll be honest with you.
Well, and it takes a special level to do that with something that you find objectionable or maybe even harmful. Like, I mean, I wouldn't take Alex Jones off of his platform, even though I find him to be problematic and maybe harmful. Like, I get it, and I understand why it's harmful, but I choose not to watch it. I don't think you should just like remove everything that you find problematic.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, but we have clearly reached a point where a lot of people, I don't know if they can't tell the difference. Like, if something's on TV, they're just willing to go with it, because it seems like that stuff is becoming larger and larger, and we don't have a way to combat it. You know, the Alex Joneses of the world can say whatever they want, and we don't have a system in place that was like, hey, people, no, that's crazy. You shouldn't believe that. People are just kind of like, okay, cool. I'm good with that. That's all I need. Let's run with it. Yeah,
that's kind of true. Oh, goodness. I've had a lot of conversations lately with people that have compared this age of the internet to, and the way we'll think about it later, to the way people felt about smoking once they realized, like, oh, yeah, it causes cancer and it's bad for you.
Like that the internet will back off of it a little bit down the road.
Well, specifically social media, like, hey, the way we're using the internet, it's like smoking. You know, there might be some medicinal things or benefits to nicotine, but we're all giving ourselves cancer right now.
You know, I've thought about that with things like MySpace, where that was like this huge thing for a while, and then it all just kind of fell apart and we all jumped ship. And I keep waiting for that to happen with Facebook or Twitter or any of these, really. And it's amazing the staying power they've had that hasn't happened. But I do think it will happen at some point. And sometimes you see little glimpses of it where you're like, that's the thing right there that's going to start taking this down.
Don't you think part of it is already happening with the younger generation who are taking in social media that's actually more like one-to-one or private, where when we took to social media and we took to the internet, it was about blogging and having an opinion and broadcasting it. And now I kind of feel like nobody's starting a blog. Nobody has a public Facebook page. Kids aren't even using Facebook. They're doing what amounts to one-to-one texting or small group chats that aren't actually public at all.
And they're doing a lot of video and pictures, you know, the Instagram, Snapchat, things like that, where it's much less like, we all use social media on Facebook and Twitter, all of us olds, to consume news and to project news and opinions and things like that, like you were saying. And yeah, the younger generation is more just using it to connect, it appears anyway. So that could definitely have a big impact too, where we are obsessed with, you know, I have to post this article and show my uncle that he's wrong about this political thing. And I don't see that from a younger generation at all. So, you know, that shift might already be happening, where they are finding a much more healthy way to use social media than what we ever did.
I hope.
It wouldn't be that hard. Like, let's not give them too much credit.
Yeah. Well, we're all like addicted, so
so much.
It's like, it's exactly like quitting smoking. You have no idea how hard it's going to be until you actually have to do it.
I was thinking tonight, like, I wonder if I should just take my Twitter feed and pick like my favorite 20 people and just turn notifications on for them. And rather than scrolling my feed, just always have like those top 20 people and assume that they'll cover pretty much everything I need. Like, I was trying to think of healthier ways to go about social media.
Yes. I unfortunately, I don't have any answers. So I don't even remember how we got there, which is a really nice way of the conversation flowing. But I'm trying to figure out how we got here and where to go next. Have you caught up to the Kellen Winslow Jr. arrest news?
A little bit. I saw just I saw that he was arrested, and I saw the charges, and that seems pretty gross and scary.
Kellen Winslow Jr. was arrested on rape and kidnapping charges, 9 criminal charges. It sounds like somebody he might have had a relationship, and he forced them to like stay in his car, and then took them someplace and forced them to stay there, and then, you know, all that other ugly stuff, kidnapping and rape and forcible rape and all kinds of awful things. He was kind of showing some signs of being off the deep end when he was still with the Jets, I think.
Yeah, he always seemed just a little bit off, and it's so hard with like this kind of stuff where you follow these guys for this long, and like, how are you supposed to feel about this? How are you supposed to? Does it change your memories of him from when he was on the team or anything like that? It's so, because it seems, obviously he's just been charged with it, but it seems like a really bad, really disgusting case where he, you know, far and beyond a lot of even some of the terrible stuff we've seen before, and it's so hard to kind of reconcile being a sports fan and dealing with this.
And I was a fan of his football career, and I was a fan of his career in Cleveland, and I was sad when he broke his knee and lost part of his career, and it's like, woo, yeah. I don't know if it changes the past, but it certainly changes like the moment looking forward. It's just, it complicates everything.
I find myself getting attached to less or fewer players because of things like this, where so many guys have stuff like this come out that it's hard to ever get too attached to a player. I mean, in Cleveland, part of it is because they're never here for that long, but the other part is just identifying with these people who can have something like this pop up at some point. Just is such an icky, strange feeling that it just becomes harder and harder to care individually about guys.
Well, and it's not just in sports either. You know, in the past 12 months, part of the Me Too movement, one of my favorite bands got caught up in it, Brand New.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm sorry to tell you that they had just put out maybe the best album of their entire career, and the music is absolutely unbelievably phenomenal. So what am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that? You know, the lead singer is accused of being manipulative and using his fame early on in their career, and maybe I don't know if it went as far as full-on sexual assault, but it was certainly some creepy, illicit behavior. So does that mean, do I have to stop listening to Brand New now? Do I have to stop listening to their new album? Can I listen to their old stuff before I knew? Like, it just, there's no cut and dry way to deal with these kinds of things.
No, and it makes it impossible. Like, and it's funny, and I think we talked about this last time, but we're just trying to consume like this little thing outside of our lives. Like, we're just trying to have these little hobbies that are supposed to be so innocent. Like, I just want to listen to music, or I just want to watch some dumb guys in spandex run around and hit each other for a couple of hours. And it like how complicated it all gets so quickly.
I just want to watch really Kevin Spacey on Netflix.
Right. Like, I just liked this show. Does that make me a bad person? Because I liked this show? What does it say about me? Like, why am I having this crisis right now?
I think Louis C.K.'s stand-up is hysterical.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it becomes harder and harder to identify with anyone on anything ever.
Yeah. So, Again, I don't know where to go with it from there, but it's kind of wholly depressing. I was hoping to feel better.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I've got one. I think, was it Mary Kay was answering questions this week, and somebody asked how many wins the Browns would have. I think they said something like 9 or 10 or something like that. Is this the hardest year ever to predict how many wins the Browns are going to have?
Okay. It is by far the hardest year because, number one, it's the biggest quarterback upgrade that they've had in probably 20 years since they've been back. And they had all these young guys coming into their own at the same time, and they changed offensive coordinators. They added an offensive coordinator. And so if you start to add up all these different things that have changed, we really know absolutely nothing about this team except we think that they're going to be better. And then we're also balancing the historical awfulness of this team, where 4 or 5 wins would be an improvement. But if they're truly a mediocre NFL team, They should go 8-8, but that feels so gaudy in Cleveland.
Yeah, and it's also hard because,
But make no mistake, 8-8 is not good.
Right. It'd be a huge jump, though. It'd be amazing to go from 0 to 8. I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan. I went from 1 to 11 one year, and it's like shocking to your senses. You don't really know how to react as a fan. But I think it's hard with the Browns because it was so hard during this teardown to know what the roster was. Because guys would argue, oh, well, this guy, they drafted a starter in the 7th round. All right, well, is starting for the Browns good? I don't know. I don't know if these guys are actually good because they're starting for an awful team. Would they be doing that anywhere else? It's hard to tell. So,
well, and guess what? Joe Schobert made a Pro Bowl as an alternate, and what have the Browns done? They just keep signing guys at linebacker.
Right. And so that, I think, is what's going to be interesting because they brought in a bunch of high-end guys, which is really cool, but you have no idea what that like bottom of the roster, middle of the roster is going to look like, and it's been overturned a ton too. So you just have no idea kind of what that portion of the roster looks like, which ends up always being way more important than we expect. We always look at the stars' names and project on that, but depth and all of that kind of matters too. And I think it's really hard to tell with them what that's going to be because it was so hard to evaluate the team in the middle of that teardown. So I'm like really fascinated in them for this year.
I'm fascinated too because I do think that there's a chance that this could be like a 7 or an 8 win team, and people will call me crazy for having rose-colored glasses. And I'm sitting here, I've watched the NFL for the better part of 40 years now, and I'm like, no, you guys are confused. That's not good. It's just mediocre. I'm saying that the Browns are going to be mediocre this year.
Right, and the hardest thing with the Browns, I think, is that they're so consistently awful, but they've been awful with so many different owners and coaches and GMs and players and everything else that it's not rational to blame this current regime for past mistakes. But at the same time, it's been so consistently accurate to do that for 20 years that you can't stop. So, like, sure, you can't make fun of their new GM and their new structure, and Tyrod Taylor has nothing to do with that 20 years and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm still going to project it on him. You're damn right I'm going to.
But the last time the Browns had this level of talent infusion was probably the year that that they brought in Joe Jurevicius, and they had Braylon Edwards coming into his own, and Kellen Winslow Jr. was going crazy, and Derek Anderson had his rock star year. And it very much kind of feels that way in terms of what they've done in the talent infusion with, they sign the running back, Carlos Hyde. And then they go and they draft somebody who's probably has potential to be even better in Chubb. They re-sign Duke Johnson. They bring in these receivers. Josh Gordon might actually stay eligible and play. He looks like an absolute beast right now. And then to top it all off, they bring in a guy, Tyrod Taylor, who, if nothing else, should be predictable in what he can deliver.
I love Tyrod Taylor. I'm excited for Tyrod Taylor.
But that predictability is worth so much. I don't know what Brandon Whedon can do. He can throw through the end of the end zone from any spot in the field, but he's got no accuracy. And so it's always been conjecture at the quarterback spot. At least now, we know this guy is not going to throw 80 yards over the top necessarily, but we know what he can do.
Yeah, and it was even in the past when they brought in veterans, like people were trying to argue for Josh McCown. It's like he's been awful. Like he's been awful his whole career. He's just literally his only attribute is being a veteran, which just kept getting signed, which I guess is a skill. And not that he played poorly, but it was hard to get excited about a guy who was that awful for most of his career. But now you have a legit, really good quarterback. Really good in the sense that, he's middle of the league starter?
Yeah, he is capable of putting up the 8th, 9th, or 10th best quarterback year, and probably won't put up worse than the 15th or 16th quarterback year.
And if he goes down, you've got the number 1 overall pick who isn't some huge project that needs all of his mechanics overworked or needs a year to learn for the game to slow down. Baker Mayfield could easily start game 1 for most teams.
And an offensive coordinator who might just simplify things enough for that rookie if he's forced into duty.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to be optimistic that aren't similar to past Brown seasons. So I get a lot of the optimism. It's just funny that you're coming off a 0-win year, and there's just so many questions and so much history there that it's really hard to offer any sort of real prediction on what they're going to do this year. So, and the division's probably gotten worse, right?
I think so. And I won't predict it anymore, but one of these years, Father Time will win against Ben Roethlisberger. It's going to happen someday.
I think the NFL should step in and put Lamar Jackson on any other team. Right? Like, nobody wants to watch him in Baltimore. I feel like everybody was pretty much like on board. Like, all right, this guy's gonna be cool. Like, let's hope he goes to a fun team. And then he just didn't. Like, he went to Baltimore, and everybody's like, oh man. Like, if he was on Jacksonville right now, wouldn't that be pretty fun?
It would be. Although I've never been less of a casual NFL fan than I am right now.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that's I think a lot of people are in that area. Like, the more people I talk to, just they have their fantasy team, but they're not actually caring about games like they used to.
I've been like this with baseball for probably 15 years now, where I don't really care. When I was in college and immediately after, we would watch Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, no matter who was playing, and we would watch other baseball games. Now, if it's not an Indians game, there's zero chance, including playoffs and World Series. If the Indians aren't playing, I'm not watching.
Do you think part of it is just how many games are on now?
Yes.
I like you said, you used to sit down and watch Sunday Night Baseball, but now you can watch baseball pretty much whenever you want. And the NFL's on 4 or 5 days a week. It's not hard to watch football anymore.
Yeah, football games are not special.
No, not at all. When they used to be, Monday Night Football used to just be like amazing. I think that's part of it. Like, we all have so much now.
Yeah, because you can watch it Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and some parts of the year you can watch it on Saturday too, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't become special, and the matchups are never, as good as you expect, and it gets boring quick for some reason.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else? I can't think of anything else that I want to talk about. At some point this year, we should talk about the Indians. I'm just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just Cavs fatigue where it's hard to get into the Indians this year, and they started so slow and kind of annoying, but we have a couple, Kluber's putting up an insane year. Jose Ramirez is putting up an insane year. Lindor's still there. Like, I feel like I'm not properly appreciating these super duper stars that we've been begging this team to have for forever.
I'm enjoying it. I just don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Like, yeah, the bullpen needs some help. They're just, nothing's that exciting. Bullpens are just the worst things in the world to talk about. Is there anything worse in sports to talk about? Like, any actual important thing in sports worse than talking about than bullpens?
Oh man, no, nothing is worse than talking about bullpens or like a base running gaffe that happened on a Wednesday in the middle of June.
Right.
Like, to hyper-analyze any one play in the middle of June seems like the dumbest thing in the world.
And I like to do with numbers, but the hard thing with baseball is it takes so long for the numbers to matter. Like, they're just now starting to really matter. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. And I'm just not worried yet. I know it's been mediocre and I know they have problems, but this team is going to look different by the time they're in the actual pennant race and down the stretch. It's just not going to look like this because if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that the Indians are going to look different.
And I do enjoy the stupid sports things that we tell ourselves. Like, I absolutely 100% believe that it is important that we haven't peaked at all and that we're saving our best baseball for later in the year. God, that doesn't make any sense.
I hate stuff like that.
It doesn't make any sense.
Should have saved up some of those runs for the second half of the doubleheader.
I am convinced that I would rather, that 22-game winning streak last year in the middle of the year was us peaking way too early, and we needed to gel later in the year. And for some reason in my head, that all makes sense.
Yeah, but what's the alternative? Let's go down the path where you do have that choice. What's the alternative?
Yeah.
Remember when Peyton Manning sat down and cost the Browns a playoff appearance, And then the Colts got knocked out pretty early in the playoffs when they were Super Bowl contenders.
God, sports make us all so dumb. I love it.
We find proof and breadcrumbs where there are none.
It's just like the draft. Just to bring it all back to the Cavs. Like, they're going to draft someone, and I'm absolutely going to talk myself into it, no matter who it is, no matter how much I hate the prospect. Even if we Chris Grand it up and pick some guy who is going to go 20th at 8, or if we trade it for some guy I don't like, anything, no matter what we do, it will take me 1 hour to convince myself it was genius.
Well, and you know what else is funny? And we don't know anything about how good Baker Mayfield's going to be, but guess what? We already do know. He is almost 100% nothing like Johnny Manziel.
It's true.
With beyond a shadow of a doubt, Baker Mayfield has proven one thing so far, and that he is not Johnny Manziel.
Thank God.
I know, thank God, but he couldn't escape the comparisons because it was just so easy. Short, spread offense,
cocky, and it was cocky in a different way, but people didn't want to make that distinction. And yeah, no, I agree.
And that qualified as draft opinion.
There's nothing I love more than all of us having draft opinions, because I literally haven't watched one college basketball game in like 10 years.
You know what's really funny is Scott and I finally gave up. Like, Scott will openly admit, like, I don't watch enough college football. I don't watch enough college basketball. I don't have draft opinions. I'm not going to pretend. Like, I'm not going to watch YouTube videos. And he doesn't even try anymore.
I need to get there. I need to figure out how that works. And he needs to teach me his ways.
The wisdom of Scott.
Yeah, I need him to put like a PowerPoint together and then walk me through it.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Thanks so much for keeping the Thursday streak alive, Jeff.
Of course. Always enjoy it.
All right. And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.